I never imagined I'd be writing this. I guess if you had asked me a few months ago, I would have told you that my marriage was solid, that things were going well, and that we were happily moving towards starting a family. I had no reason to believe otherwise, but here I am, months later, struggling with the wreckage of a relationship I thought I could trust. Let me start at the beginning. My husband Adam and I had been together for 12 years. We started dating when we were both in our early 20s, and honestly, we grew up together. Our relationship was my first serious one, and he was my first real love. We supported each other through everything, the awkward years of figuring out life, career struggles, health issues, and everything in between. We even had financial troubles early on, which honestly brought us closer together. After years of saving, we finally bought our first house together. Things were finally starting to fall into place. After our wedding 4 years ago, we really began talking about having children. We were so excited about the future, or at least I thought we were. But then, about 6 months ago, everything changed. Adam got sick. It wasn't anything serious, but it kept him at home for a few weeks while he recovered. He had some time on his hands, and like many people in this digital age, he started playing an online game. He joined a group of players, and that's where everything began to unravel. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was just playing games with friends, right? But then, he started telling me about a particular player in his group, a woman named Lisa. I didn't think much of it, at least not at first. But over time, he began spending more and more time chatting with her. They'd text, talk on the phone, and even share private messages. I wasn't worried at first, because he reassured me it was all in good fun. It was just a friendship, he said. But then, one day, he broke down crying. It was a month ago. He confessed to me that he had fallen in love with Lisa. He told me it had been gradual, that he hadn't even realized it was happening until it was too late. He told me he never meant for it to go this far, but he was in love with someone else. The guilt in his eyes as he admitted this to me was overwhelming. He said that, while he still loved me, he couldn't deny what he felt for her. I was shocked, hurt, angry, but most of all, I felt completely betrayed. Adam went on to tell me that they'd been texting privately for months. Their communication had escalated into something deeper. They'd shared intimate moments, even sexted, though he claimed that they never met in person. When Lisa suggested meeting face-to-face, Adam refused. It was then that I realized how serious it had become. He had fallen for another woman while we were planning our future together. I didn't know what to think or how to respond. I had so many questions, so many emotions running through me. I ended up leaving the house for the night, staying with a friend to get some space. I couldn't even begin to process what he had told me. Eventually, I decided to forgive him. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and I appreciated the fact that he came clean about everything. It would have been so easy for him to keep it a secret, but he didn't. We had long talks about our relationship, and I told him that while I accepted that he could love someone else, I didn't like how he had handled it. I told him that if we were going to move forward, things would have to change, and we would need to rebuild trust. Then, a few days later, Adam asked me something I wasn't prepared for. He wanted to open our marriage. It was surreal. He said that while he still wanted to be with me and start a family, he couldn't erase or ignore the feelings he had for Lisa. He wanted us both to be able to see other people with clear boundaries and communication while still being present for each other. He said he wanted us to work through this and build something better, something that included both our emotional and physical needs. I felt like I was punched in the gut. I never, in a million years, expected this to be the solution he offered. I wasn't against the idea of polyamory per se, but it never crossed my mind as something we'd consider. I just wanted to fix what was broken between us, not change the entire foundation of our relationship. It felt like he was asking me to accept the very thing that had broken me in the first place, him loving someone else. I told him I wasn't comfortable with the idea. It was too soon. I needed time to process everything, and we had a lot to discuss before making any decisions. His suggestion left me unsettled, but I tried to keep my emotions in check and think things through logically. But as time passed, the uncertainty only grew. Would I be able to trust him again? Could I accept his desire for something more, something beyond the monogamy we had shared? Should I even try to work through this, or was it a sign that things were over between us? I was at a crossroads, unsure of what to do. I kept wondering if there was a way to make this work, if it was just a phase, or if I was trying to convince myself that the life we had built together was worth saving. As I sit here now, reflecting on it all, I realize that there's so much more to consider. But right now, I just don't know where we go from here. Should I try to salvage our relationship and go down this path of polyamory? Or should I walk away and find a new chapter of my life without him? I feel lost, and I don't know what the right answer is. The unexpected turn. It had been 12 years since Jake and I first met, and I thought I knew him better than anyone else. 4 years of marriage, ups and downs, the kind of years where you think you've seen everything together. We just bought our first house, and I was getting excited about the idea of starting a family. Things were hard, sure. Financial struggles, work stress, the usual, but we always made it through. I had no reason to think anything would shake the foundation of what we'd built. Then, a few months ago, everything changed. Jake had been feeling sick for a while, so he ended up staying home from work for a bit. We had this routine where we'd try to make the best of things, even on rough days. But one thing was different this time. He started playing an online game to kill time. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, just a way to pass the time while he was recovering. He joined a group of players, and that's when things started to unravel. One of the people in the group was a woman named Emily, someone he'd quickly grown close to. I didn't think much of it at first, just a friend from a game, right? But it didn't stay that simple. I should have noticed sooner, but looking back, I see the signs now. They started texting outside of the game, having one-on-one conversations. They spoke every week, and then it turned into calls. Jake tried to explain it to me, but I could already see the emotional distance building between us. I didn't want to confront him about it right away, hoping it was just a passing thing. But a month ago, Jake broke down and told me everything. It was almost like he didn't know how to tell me, but he couldn't keep it inside any longer. He admitted that, over time, his feelings for Emily had deepened. He said he didn't understand it at first. It was gradual, he told me. But eventually, he realized he was in love with her. I froze when he said that. I can't even explain the mix of emotions I felt in that moment. He showed me the messages between them, the texts where he said he loved her too. The pain was unbearable, but I couldn't help but wonder how much of it was guilt. Why hadn't he told me sooner? Why hadn't I seen it coming? He told me everything. He said he wanted to be honest, that he was so sorry, and that he couldn't control how things happened. He told me that, despite his feelings for Emily, he chose me. He said I was the one he wanted to stay with. He apologized over and over again, but the damage was already done. I didn't know what to think or feel. He was so remorseful, and part of me believed him. He'd always been such a kind and loving partner, and we'd been through so much together. But this was different. I needed space to think. I stayed with a friend that night, just to clear my head. I was devastated, but I didn't know what to do. The next day, after hours of crying and thinking, I decided to forgive him. I told him I was hurt, that what he had done was a betrayal, but that I still loved him. I appreciated that he had come forward and been honest with me, even if it was after everything had already happened. He said he wanted to work through it, that he didn't want to lose me. We spent days talking, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Jake was insistent that he wasn't asking for an open marriage for selfish reasons, but because he didn't want to lose me. Still, the idea of polyamory made me uncomfortable. I had never even considered it, but he seemed to think that this was the only way we could move forward without losing what we had. I had to admit, I didn't understand. The thought of him being with someone else didn't sit right with me, no matter how much he insisted it was about love and not just physical attraction. I didn't know what to do with the feelings swirling inside me. He said he was willing to go to therapy, that he wanted to rebuild our trust. But even as he said that, a part of me felt like it was all too much. Too soon. Too wrong. When he asked about opening our marriage to polyamory, I was completely blindsided. It felt like a slap in the face after everything we'd just been through. How could he think I would be okay with that after he had already betrayed me? I know people who are into polyamory, and I've seen how it works for them. But for me, it felt like a foreign concept. It felt like he was asking me to accept that what he had done wasn't wrong, that it was just part of who he was. He wanted to keep seeing Emily, but he also wanted to be with me. He was asking me to accept that, to share him in a way I wasn't sure I could ever do. I tried to tell him how uncomfortable the idea made me, but I didn't want to shut him out completely. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was love. I wasn't sure. But I agreed to give it some time and think things through. Part of me wanted to say no, but another part of me didn't want to walk away from everything we had built together. The more I thought about it, the more it tore me up inside. Could I live with him loving someone else? Could I deal with the pain, the trust issues, and the uncertainty? What would that mean for our future together? But deep down, I was struggling with the idea of ending everything. The idea of starting over after 12 years with someone who had been my whole world was terrifying. Yet I couldn't ignore the fact that his betrayal had changed everything. How could we ever go back to being the way we were before? Even if I forgave him, I'd never forget what had happened. And that's where I am now, stuck in the middle of these conflicting emotions. I can't deny that I'm still in love with Jake, but I'm not sure if that's enough anymore. I'm trying to be honest with myself, trying to make the best decision for my own well-being, but right now, it feels impossible to know what the right choice is. A week had passed since Jake first brought up the idea of opening our marriage. I'd been avoiding it as much as possible, pushing it to the back of my mind, but it lingered there, growing like a shadow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw us, what we had been, and what we might be now. Could we really rebuild this? Could I really live with the idea of him loving someone else? I woke up one morning and it hit me. I hadn't truly faced it. I had spent the past week pretending I could just sweep it under the rug, but the truth was that I needed to confront it head on. I couldn't keep dragging it out, pretending that things would just magically go back to normal. I needed to talk to him. Jake had been giving me space, respecting the fact that I needed time to process everything. But that day, I realized I couldn't keep avoiding it. I had to decide if I was willing to try and make this work or if it was time to walk away. I couldn't live in this limbo forever. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, when I sat down next to him. I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He was waiting for me to make the next move. I could feel the weight of everything between us, but I also knew that if we were going to move forward, I needed to be honest with him. "Jake," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "we need to talk about this." He set his phone down and turned to face me. "I know. I've been waiting for you to be ready." I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About Emily, about polyamory, about us. And I need to be honest with you. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can live with you loving someone else." The words came out heavier than I expected. I had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but hearing myself say it aloud made it all the more real. Jake looked at me, his face soft, and I could see the hurt there. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not saying that I don't love you, Jake. I do. But this is different. This isn't just about feelings anymore. It's about trust. It's about how I feel about myself now. How I feel about us. I don't think I can ever feel secure in our relationship again if I have to share you in that way. I can't pretend that everything's okay when it feels like my world is being turned upside down." I could see his face fall, the disappointment in his eyes, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. It wasn't about me trying to hurt him. It was about me trying to protect myself. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly. "I've made so many mistakes, but I'm willing to do anything to make it right. I thought that if we could open things up, we could fix it. That maybe it would make us stronger." I shook my head slowly. Maybe for some people, it works, but for me, it doesn't. I'm not that person, Jake. I don't want to share you with anyone else. I want the man I married, the man who I thought I knew, the man who didn't hide things from me. The silence between us stretched long. He looked down, nodding, as if he had expected me to say this. Maybe he had hoped I wouldn't, but I knew that deep down he had been bracing for this possibility all along. "I understand," he said, voice tight. "I really do, but I can't change how I feel. I can't just turn off my feelings for Emily. I wish I could, but I can't." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. His words stung, but I wasn't surprised. It was the reality of the situation, and as much as I hated it, I couldn't ignore it. We were at a crossroads, and there was no going back. "I'm not asking you to change your feelings," I said, my voice wavering a little. "I'm asking you to understand that I can't live like this. I can't live in this uncertainty, wondering if you'll always have a part of yourself somewhere else. I don't want to compete for your love. I want to be enough for you." Jake's face crumpled, and for the first time in a long while, I saw him break. The walls that he had built around himself came down, and I saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. I don't want to lose you either." But the truth was, we were already losing something. The trust that had once felt so unshakable between us was gone, and no matter how much we both wanted to fix it, the damage had already been done. I couldn't unsee the things I had learned, and neither could he. We sat in silence for a while, neither of us sure what the next step would be. The love between us was still there, but it wasn't enough to erase the pain, the betrayal, and the deep uncertainty that now lingered in the air. Finally, I spoke again. "I need to think. I need to figure out what I need, but I can't keep pretending that everything's okay." Jake nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I understand. I'm sorry. I really am." "I know you are," I whispered, my voice thick, "but sometimes love just isn't enough, Jake." It was the hardest thing I had ever said, but I knew it was the truth. Maybe, with time, I could forgive him. Maybe, someday, we could rebuild the trust. But right now, it felt like the love we shared wasn't enough to fix everything that had been broken. And so, there we were. Two people who had once been everything to each other, now standing at the edge of something that might never be the same again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this uncertain space. I had to choose the path that would allow me to heal, whether that meant staying or letting go.